Ready? Hi.
Well, so first and foremost, we want to welcome all of you and thank you for taking the time to join us today. So for those of you who are new to our monthly webinars, my name is Erica Lockhart.
And my name is Lorin Ruttenberg.
And together we are Ahead of the Curve Homes with Compass. And today we're actually joined by one of our team members, Brandon Walls. So I'm going to turn the floor over to him for a second so he can introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his area of specialty.
Hello, everyone. As Erica stated, my name is Brandon Walls. I've been with Ahead of the Curve for about 4 years now. My specialty includes Inglewood and South LA, and I work mostly with first-time home buyers. So this webinar is right up my alley. Glad to be here.
Okay, cool. So today, what we're going to do is go through an update on the market stats, just so you can catch up with what's happening on the market, little quick glimpse. And then we're going to go through, we've prepared a bunch of questions, hopefully to answer what buyers need, questions that buyers may have. So they're from a financial perspective, from a mental perspective. We're gonna go through a bunch of questions. While we're doing that, if you have any thoughts or questions or need any more explanation, if you take your cursor and you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little icon called chat. Click on that and type in your question, and we will definitely answer all your questions after we go through the list of questions that we've prepared. Okay, so now I will pull up the market stats and we'll start there.
Okay, so we'll start with, these are the key neighborhoods that we serve. So this includes Baldwin Hills, Baldwin Vista, View Park, Ladera Heights, and Windsor Hills. So like the previous pandemic months of like March through June, we're definitely seeing volume for new listings, pending sales, and closed sales is down across the board year over year, while the average sales price actually increased by 3%, and listings actually increased by 14% month over month if you look at the previous month of May. So we're definitely starting to see an uptick in inventory and an uptick just overall in the market, which is a great thing. So moving on to the June, the condo market. So here, new listings and pending sales are also down, while the number of sold listings actually increased by 86%. So it went from 1 sale to 7 total sales. And lastly, average sales price dipped by about 10%. And this decrease is actually being skewed by the fact that there's only 1 condo townhouse sale in 2019. But yeah, we're seeing again that volume is down consistently, but values are remaining somewhat steady and stable.
Okay, and then we go to Mar Vista. So this is single family home sales comparing June 20 to June 19. Same story. As you can see, well, new listings are down by almost 50%. Pending listings increased a little bit actually, and sold listings were down by 28%. But again, same story. Sales price actually is increased. And that just has to do with, less supply, values are holding very firm because the supply is low. And then we have condos in Mar Vista. So again, the supply is down, the amount of new listings is down, not a whole lot. The amount of pending listings is down a little bit, and the amount of sold listings is down. But the value, as you can see, it's barely any different. It's about a 2% difference. So again, I would say the values are holding and the volume is down.
Okay, so moving on to Culver City, volume is down across the board with new listings dropping by 4% and total closed sales by 29%. And the average sales price actually experienced a gain of 13%. So here we're seeing that volume is down, but values again are actually increasing. And then moving on to the condo market. So new listings increase pretty drastically here by 44%, which is great. There was no change year over year in terms of pending sales, and total closed sales is down by 58%. And the sales price, the average sales price, dipped slightly by about 7%.
Okay, and then we have Santa Monica. So new listings went down by 23%. The amount of properties that went into escrow, however, went up, which is very interesting. So 23 versus 13, that's an increase of 44%. The amount of sold listings went down by 41%, so quite a bit, about half. And again, prices went up, so same thing, values are staying strong, and volume of transactions is down, and values are not. And then here we have the condo market in Santa Monica. And the condo market in Santa Monica is very robust. There are a lot of condos in Santa Monica versus like Mar Vista or the Baldwin Hills area where there's very few condos. Culver City has a lot of condos too. So the new listings actually went up, by 37%. Pending listings went up by 53%. And sold listings went up by just a little bit, by 9%. The values did go down, but that's because we had more sales, and so there's more fluctuation in terms of price point. So the condo market in Santa Monica is really hopping. I do think that a lot of people who can sell their condo right now are starting to, because this stay at home, and we'll get into this, but the stay at home and the whole COVID situation, working from home, has created the need for more space and for a backyard for a lot of people. So in Santa Monica, people have quite a bit of equity in their condo, and they're able to make that move into a house. I think that's a big part of it. Okay, so now Rodney is our man, our fixer. He takes care of everything for us. So he's gonna take over and moderate asking the questions.
Awesome. How's it going, everyone? So our first question is actually for Erica, and our question reads, what impact has COVID-19 had on potential buyers?
So I think there's actually quite a few buyer groups that we need to address here. So many buyers had to leave the housing market due to job loss, furloughs, and wage cuts. So unfortunately, those buyers, they're no longer in a position to buy, just given the financial implications that they've suffered as a result of the pandemic. And while they're no longer in a position to buy, they still want to buy and will more than likely return to the market at a later date once they've recouped financially. So you have that group of buyers. Then you have another group of buyers who have voluntarily left the market on a temporary basis. And even now that the stay-at-home orders and many restrictions have been lifted, they still remain inactive because they just don't feel it's 100% safe to start viewing properties again. But again, they will make their return once they feel it's safe. Then you also have a group of buyers who are out in the market actively, like hunting, looking for deals, or at least waiting for deals on the sidelines to kind of come. And then you have a group of buyers who are not as impacted by commutes anymore because, as Lorin mentioned, work at home seems to be here to stay for many. So they have the freedom and flexibility to really live in different areas. So we're seeing a lot of our buyers who maybe wanted to live, close to the train for transportation reasons. Now they can be, now they have more freedom and flexibility, so they can move farther out if they'd like. And then I think it's also important to note that lenders have also tightened restrictions for many buyers. So in many cases, they've increased the FICO score requirement. They've eliminated some types of loans altogether. They've increased down payment requirements. So this has definitely also impacted a lot of buyers in terms of buying power and affordability. The good news is that interest rates are very low and have remained low, and it appears that they will continue to be low. So this is definitely encouraging movement and encouraging buyers to move forward in the market. And then lastly, I think it's important to note, and Lorin kind of alluded to this, how COVID-19 and being like sequestered to our homes for so long has really changed how we view our surroundings and how we view our homes. So recent studies indicate that buyers, they want more space. Outdoor space is very important, square footage. They want privacy. They want to find a house that has the option to have an office. There's a lot of work from home orders and Zoom meetings, so having an office is important. Having, antibacterial surfaces, touch-free technology, additional bathrooms. So if someone does get sick, they have their own kind of, quarantine contained bathroom. Mud room, so people aren't tracking in germs and things of that nature. So, buyer choices are definitely changing as a result of COVID-19.
Thank you, Erica. So that actually leads me into asking Lorin, what impact has COVID-19 had on potential sellers?
Okay, well, as we just showed you, values have really held steady so far. So I don't think sellers are feeling, a financial impact in that way, at least yet. The reason that the prices have held is because the inventory is very, very low. So many sellers, again, have held off. They don't feel comfortable, especially if they're living in the home. A vacant home is a little different, but if they're living in the home, sellers have not felt comfortable having people come through the home. They're not ready for that. And some sellers, quite frankly, are still not ready for that. So I think, and a lot of people are just waiting to see what happens, a lot of sellers. So that's why we have very low inventory. I do feel, that we have not yet experienced the economic effects of COVID-19 yet, because there's a trickle down time. I hope that people get back to work sooner than later, but if people start having to spend extended number of months out of work, they might start needing to sell their house, I'm sure that COVID-19 is going to cause people to change their lifestyle in terms of some people are going to get a divorce, some people are going to realize that they don't have to commute to work anymore, so they can go to a different city, to a different place, and live somewhere that's much less expensive because the work from home is going to become permanent. So all of these things are just starting to kind of seep in. And I feel like we haven't even really seen what the net effects are going to be yet. It's possible that more inventory will come on the market. And if it does, it's possible that the prices will be affected, potentially drop.
Okay, so Erica, what should buyers know about how properties are shown in this new world?
So real estate has been deemed, essential business. So we are able to work and show properties. Occupied and vacant properties can now be shown to basically one buyer group at a time with certain safety precautions in place. So the California Association of Realtors released a form called the Property Entry Advisory Declaration. It's known as the PEAD form. And this form must be signed by all parties, buyers and agents, and anyone actually attending the showing prior to entry. And by signing the form, buyers and agents are acknowledging that they understand the potential risk to COVID-19 or risk exposure to COVID-19 when entering a home, and that they themselves aren't ill, don't have a fever, aren't showing any symptoms, or have knowledge of being in the presence of anyone that's tested positive for COVID-19 in the past 14 days. The form also requires everyone to adhere to social distancing while in the home, to not touch any items, not to open any doors, any cabinets. It should be a hands-free showing. And then buyers and agents are required to wear masks, obviously, and encouraged to wear shoe booties and gloves. And if you're not wearing gloves, to wash or sanitize your hand prior to the showing and then after the showing. And I think, these guidelines are really just a great way that they can be annoying, obviously, but I think it's a great way, and it's a much needed way to keep everyone, realtors and clients, safe while allowing some forward momentum in the housing market.
Thank you, Erica. So Brandon, this next question is related to offers. What do I need to provide in order to make an offer on a home?
So there's 5 components that complete an offer package. First being a buyer's letter. This is what we like to call a love letter. Our main objective here is, number one, give the seller an idea of who you are. Touch on career, family, hobbies. Two, your why. Why do you want to live here? Touch on what you love about the house and the neighborhood. Next, a pre-approval from your lender. This is going to give the seller confidence that you can obtain a loan. Next, proof of funds. The seller, they want to see that you have the money for a down payment, and they also want to see that you have the money to cover closing costs. Now, if you're using gift funds from family, have them write a letter on your behalf, and we'll include that in the offer package as your proof of funds. Credit scores. We don't need the entire credit report. We just need the first page of your credit report. This is going to outline your scores. This shows you just how responsible you are as a buyer. And usually this is sent to your from your lender along with your pre-approval letter. And last but not least, to complete the offer package is a residential purchase agreement. Now, this is where we'll lay out an offer price and our terms. Some terms will include, when do we plan on closing escrow? How much time do we need for our contingencies? We'll lay out who's going to pay for X, Y, and Z. If there's appliances in the home, do we want to include it in the sale? So those are all questions that we want answered inside of a purchase agreement. So those 5 components, that's what's going to complete your offer package, and that's what we're going to submit to a listing agent so they can present to their client, the seller.
Thank you. So this next question is for Lorin. And in order to get a loan, what are the best ways to get qualified, and how do you select the best lender?
Okay, so your realtor should definitely have a recommendation for you. The important thing to know is that by and large, we recommend going with a mortgage broker. For instance, if you walk into your bank, let's say you bank at, Wells Fargo, and you walk into Wells Fargo and you say you need a home loan, they are only going to sell you a Wells Fargo home loan. And there might be another lender out there that has a better program for you and your situation. So we pretty much always recommend that you go with a mortgage broker, because a broker is someone who works with hundreds of different lenders. And they're going to look at your situation and evaluate you and match you with the best lender for you. There is an exception to the rule, is that if you are a private banking client with UBS or Wells Fargo or whatever, typically private banking clients get the best rates from their lender, and a mortgage broker can't usually beat that. But you definitely want to choose someone who was recommended by someone you trust. So whether that be, your realtor or your parents or your uncle, but someone you trust has had good experiences with, that's very important.
Okay. So Erica, going into the topic of discussing costs, what are the costs that I need to take into consideration when purchasing a property?
So as a buyer, there are 2 types of, I'll say, closing costs that you can expect to pay. Non-recurring closing costs and then recurring closing costs. So non-recurring closing costs are paid once and never again. So these are just one-time charges for items such as your home inspection fees, which are paid up front, escrow fees, which may cover notary fees, wire fees, recording, document recording fees, document preparation, and anything pertaining really to the services provided by the escrow company. You can also expect lender fees, which are fees paid in conjunction with your loan. And this includes things like appraisal, which is also paid for upfront typically, points if you're buying down your rate, credit report, and things like lender's title insurance. So those are the kind of typical non-recurring costs. And then you have recurring fees. So these are closing costs that you'll pay again and again, either monthly or annually as time goes on, such as your homeowner's insurance. So you're going to pay that probably on an annual basis. private mortgage insurance, if it's applicable to your loan program, and then property taxes. So on average, as a buyer, you can expect to pay probably around like 1.5% of the purchase price in closing costs.
Okay, so Brandon, do sellers assist buyers with closing costs?
Well, it depends. Couple things to think about here. One, is this a hot property in a hot market? If so, it may not be a good idea to ask the seller for money. Chances are you aren't the only one. You're the only buyer interested in this one property. Now you're competing at this moment because put yourself in the seller's shoes. There are multiple people who want to purchase their home, and they're going to select the offer with the best price and the best terms. They want every dollar they think they can get for their house. And two, another thing you want to ask yourself is, has the property been sitting on the market with no offers? If so, sure, shoot your shot. You can still make a decent offer and ask the seller to cover a portion or maybe all of the closing costs. It really depends.
Okay, so as a follow-up question, as a buyer, can I make an offer on more than one property at a time? And this is for you, Brandon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, in this seller's market, I highly encourage buyers to submit an offer on homes that they really like. There's a good chance that we'll probably be, again, in a multiple offer situation on every property we submit on. And I try to prep my buyers' expectations. I tell them, we'll put our best foot forward on each property, and if it's meant to be, it'll be. If we lose out on the house, at least we know we gave it our best shot. Now, in some cases, you may get an accepted offer for more than one house. Now, if this happens, as your realtor, we'll be here to guide you and to help you make a decision and pick the best home for you. In this market, listing agents, they understand and they know, and they're very well aware that buyers are submitting on multiple properties and not just the property that they have listed.
Okay, so speaking of that, Lorin, this question is for you. This next question, how do I get my offer accepted in a bidding war?
Okay, that's a good one. So obviously putting your best foot forward, all you can do is give your best, whatever your top price is, your best terms that are capable for you. Obviously, that's what you can do, and you have to do that. Brandon already touched on this earlier, but writing a personal note to the seller is also very important. As agents, we try to find out as much as we can about the seller, because it really helps if you can write a note that touches something within the seller. It really can make all of the difference. If there are multiple offers and things are close, the seller is going to want to go with that person who they felt a connection to, And I have an example of this. Like, I was in a multiple offer situation once, and the seller was a total Porsche fanatic, and turned out the buyer was a total Porsche fanatic. So the buyer that I was representing actually wrote about Porsches in his letter, and he ended the purchase price ended with 911. He made sure of that. And it was, this is true, and it's a multiple offer, and of course he got it. You know what I mean? So if your agent can, the more information we can find out, you never know how it'll be useful. But I would say that's really important. And then the other thing that's huge is agent relationships. So it's definitely can make all the difference in the world if the listing agent knows who the buyer's agent is and trusts the buyer's agent. If we have a choice, like when we're in that position, when we're the listing agents, when we have a choice, we know certain agents are great. They have a great reputation. We've worked with them before. We know they know how to do a deal, versus someone who we don't really know, or maybe we've heard bad things about them, or just they don't come across as very professional. That is a deal killer right there. It makes a huge difference. So we we really work at cultivating relationships with other agents. It's one of the most important aspects of the business. Clients go, clients come and go, clients move away, but the agent community, we're here basically to stay. And having those relationships is crucial. I can't tell you how many times, like, we've been in a multiple offer situation representing the buyer, and we knew the agent, and they call us, and I don't want to say they totally tip their hand, but they give us information that they feel we need so that we can be the winning bidder.
Okay, so that leads me into thinking about once the offer is accepted. And Erica, this question is for you. What can a buyer expect during the escrow period?
So I think, one of those kind of hard to understand elements is the process of being in escrow, which basically occurs between the time the seller accepts your offer up until the moment you close escrow and basically receive the keys to your new home. So the escrow company itself acts as a neutral third party to collect the required funds and purchase agreement documents involved in the closing process. So including the initial earnest money deposit, loan documents, grant deeds, things of that nature. So in terms of what you can expect, first your offer is accepted by the seller, and then we open escrow. So escrow is opened with your earnest money deposit, which is typically 3% of the purchase price. Once escrow is opened, you can expect to receive escrow instructions, seller disclosures, and other transaction-related documents and disclosures for your review and completion. Your lender starts working on securing your financing, so the appraisal is ordered. In addition to the appraisal being ordered, you'll also perform all of your home inspections, and then negotiations will begin for repairs and credits based on those home inspection findings. And while all of this is happening, your lender is kind of working in the background on getting your loan fully approved. You can expect to receive paperwork from the escrow company and requests from your lender, like, all throughout the process. It's a lot of paperwork. Once you've successfully completed all of your inspections, the appraisal is done, disclosures have been executed, and your loan has been fully approved, we do the final walkthrough to verify property condition and the completion of any repairs that were negotiated. And then a few days before you're scheduled to close escrow, you'll sign a huge stack of loan documents, and then typically the next day your loan is funded, and then typically the day after that we actually physically close escrow.
Okay, so that leads into my next question, and this question is for you, Brandon. How are you paid as the buyer's agent?
I actually get this question a lot. I mean, rightfully so. Buyers want to know, what are the costs involved, right, when it's time to work with the real estate agent. But buyers do not pay commissions they don't pay commissions at all. Now, listing agents and buyer agents' commissions are paid from the seller's proceeds of the sale. So that is how we get paid at the end when we're when we're helping out buyers.
Okay. And our next question is for you, Lorin. It reads, how would you respond to a buyer that says, I do not want to commit to only one agent to represent me. I want to work with a listing agent as they can help me get a lower price for the property. And if there are multiple offers, they guarantee me that I get the property.
Okay. Well, this is like a very common misconception. So what I will say, it's kind of, I touched on it in my last explanation, but as a listing agent, we have a fiduciary obligation to the seller, okay, not to the buyer that comes along. So we have to represent the seller. So one thing as a buyer that you're going to need to ask yourself, it's not getting the property, obviously, is huge. It's a very big aspect, but then you have to get through the escrow. Then you have to go through inspections, and you have to go through appraisals, and you have to go through everything. And if you're going to be represented by the seller's agent, their fiduciary obligation is to the seller. So who's representing you? That's a question that you're going to have to ask yourself. In terms of multiple offers, I will tell you that when we have a multiple offer situation, if we are writing an offer for a buyer as well, we don't handle the multiple offers. We hand that off to our office manager, because it would not be appropriate. It'd be really unfair for us to have kind of that insider information and be giving our buyer, it would be pitting everybody against each other and giving them information that other people don't have access to. And that would not be ethical, frankly, and we don't do that. So like I was saying, we are going to protect our reputations as agents. We do not want to get a reputation as someone who doesn't treat everybody fairly and who is unethical, because ultimately our reputation is the most important thing to us. Ultimately, in our career, that's what's going to help us get forward, succeed, make a lot of sales, have agents call us when they have off-market properties because they know that we're going to close the deal if we have a buyer. You can't buy trust. You can only do the right thing and earn it. And so I will never compromise that for some buyer who calls me and wants to make an offer on my listing. I hope that answers it.
Okay. So Erica, that leads me into the topic of earnest money deposit. Is there any way I can lose my earnest money deposit?
So the answer to this question is yes. There is a way that you can lose your earnest money deposit. But before I go into detail, I just want to explain what an earnest money deposit is, just in case there's anyone that isn't aware. So it's a deposit that's made to the seller that's essentially held by escrow that represents a buyer's good faith to buy a home. And it also gives the seller monetary assurance that a buyer, won't back out of the contract without some sort of valid reason. And I think I mentioned this before, but the industry standard for a deposit is 3% of the purchase price. So as a buyer, you stand to lose your deposit if you decide to just jump ship on a real estate transaction without valid cause after all contingencies have been removed. So that's the key. If you've removed all of your contingencies, and there's 3 key contingencies. You have your inspection contingency, which happens during your investigation period, your appraisal contingency, and your loan contingency. So if you physically removed all of those contingencies in writing, and then decide after the fact that you no longer want to move forward, then you could potentially lose all or a portion of your deposit.
Okay. So Lorin, this next question is a bit of a 2-part question. What difference does the down payment amount make to the seller and why? And can you be competitive with a lower amount like 5%?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'll take the first part. Ultimately, it doesn't make any difference to the seller. The purchase price is the purchase price. So let's say the purchase price is $900,000. Ultimately, the seller is going to get $900,000. Does it matter if the buyer put 5, 10, 15, or 30% down? Ultimately, the amount of money that the seller gets is the same amount of money that the seller gets. However, it can be more difficult. I can't sugarcoat this. It can be more difficult to get an offer accepted with low money down because the perception is that the loan will be a little bit more difficult. If there's any appraisal issue, there's no flexibility in terms of having any extra money to cover anything. And it's just the perception is that the buyer is not as strong as a buyer who is putting more money down. That's not always the case, but that's the perception. So we often guide people, even if they're putting low money down, if they can show proof of funds and they have more money, but they prefer to leverage their money and not, put so much down and take a larger loan. We still encourage them to show the proof of funds for the larger amount of money. So to give the seller some security, if it doesn't appraise or if anything happens, the buyer has the money to increase their down payment. Or even we might write the offer with a higher down payment than what they plan on doing. And they can sort of switch that in escrow if they plan to put less money down. The other thing I'll talk about really quickly is FHA loans. We don't deal with FHA loans too much in our market because the loan limits, there are not many properties that conform with the loan limits in our market. But FHA are government loans. They're 3% down loans. They are very good loans if we can make it work, but the appraisals are more stringent. So if there's like paint peeling, they take condition of the property becomes a lot more important in an FHA appraisal than in a conventional appraisal. and it's harder to pass through an FHA appraisal. So that can be something that, you know, hangs sellers up a little bit.
Okay, so to continue the conversation on appraisals, Brandon, this next question is for you. Is what happens if the property appraises for less than the contract price?
Okay, so I think it's very important in the beginning to set the expectations to the buyer. So just so you understand why we need an appraisal, the banks want to make sure that they lend you the money for the home and you're not overpaying for the home, okay? Now, typically, this doesn't happen too often. The only time where there could be a possibility of this happening is if it's a unique property and there's not really comps to support the price that that we're offering. Now, in this case, the buyer needs to know what their options are if the home doesn't appraise. So there's three things that can happen. Depending on the loan, the value with your loan, you may have to come up with the difference. Two, you may have to ask the seller to adjust the price. Or three, maybe cancel the agreement. Now, there are many different scenarios that can come up with this, but our job as your realtor is to protect you and make sure if we did need to cancel, we can do so without risking your earnest money deposit and getting out of this property or getting out of escrow unscathed.
Okay, so Erica, this next set of questions is a bit of a two-part question also. Is how do I choose an inspector and how many inspections do I need to do? And then the next question is how much should I expect to pay for inspection costs?
Okay, so the first thing I want to stress is that home inspections are a very important part of the home buying process. When you purchase a home, you're making a huge investment, so it's really important that you do your due diligence and you know exactly what you're buying. As a potential buyer, the home inspection is basically your authoritative proof of any property related issue and just all the property problems. And most purchase contracts and purchase agreements are contingent upon the results of the home inspection. So armed with the knowledge from the home inspection, you'll be able to either request that the seller fix or repair certain items. You can request that the price be reduced, so you can renegotiate the price, or even request a credit to reflect future repairs, or walk away. If the condition of the property is that bad and you just don't feel comfortable moving forward, you can definitely walk away. So with regards to choosing an inspector, most buyers hire a home inspector that their realtor recommends. So most seasoned agents will have a network of trusted professionals that they've worked with before. Personally speaking, we've established great working relationships with inspectors that we trust will do a very thorough and comprehensive job. And inspectors who really, take their time and address all of our clients' concerns and questions. Regarding the number of inspections that are needed, that's going to depend on the type of property. So for most single family homes, you should expect to get a general inspection. So this is a visual observation of every component of the house where the inspector, identifies and calls out any sort of health, safety, or major mechanical issues in the home. We also recommend a termite inspection. So this will uncover if there's any sort of infestation issues with termites. A sewer line inspection is also recommended. This inspection is done with a camera that's attached to a snake line. So it goes down the sewer line and records the state of the sewer and identifies any sort of cracks or clogs or blockages. And then lastly, if the house has a fireplace, you'll want to get a chimney inspection. And just like with the sewer line inspection, that's also done with a camera. And they're looking for cracks, any missing parts, and just, the overall structural integrity, any other kind of fire-related hazards. For condos and townhomes, you'll want to determine what responsibility, like what the HOA's responsibility is, so what they cover and what they don't cover, and then determine which of the inspections I just mentioned makes the most sense given that. And then it's important to note the general inspector he'll also call out any sort of additional inspections that he recommends. So for instance, if the house has a ton of electrical issues or if there's a lot of plumbing issues, he'll suggest that you have a licensed electrician or plumber come out to the property and perform like an actual plumbing or electrical inspection.
Okay, so Brandon, let's say that I'm
Oh,
currently
Sorry,
renting.
sorry, Rodney. And then you also asked about costs
Yes, yeah.
regarding the home inspection. So inspection costs range depending on the inspector, the type of property, and then the size of the property. So for a general inspection, you can expect to pay anywhere from like $350 to $600. For sewer line, anywhere from $225 to $300. For termite, I would say anywhere from $80 to $125. And then chimney on average is around $300 to $350. So in total, you're looking at about $1,000 to like $1,400 in inspection fees.
Okay, thank you, Erica. So Brandon, let's say that I'm renting my home. When should I give notice to my landlord that I'm moving out?
Okay. Can you hear me? My screen is kind of frozen.
Yes, I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Oh, okay, perfect. So this is a very good question, Rodney. I would say this: if you're in escrow and everything checks out, inspections, appraisal, you have full loan approval, then it's time to give notice to your landlord. At least by this time, all of your contingencies have been removed, and you are now moving forward with the purchase of the home. And this should happen about 21 days into escrow. Now, just keep in mind that there may be an overlap with rent and your new mortgage for your new home. So as a buyer, just be prepared. Be prepared for that if there's any type of overlay or overlap.
Okay. And this next question, Lorin, is a bit of a two-part question. What is the best way to find out about neighborhood, particularly if it's up and coming, and how can you tell that it is?
Okay, well, that's the most fun thing about working in LA, actually, because we see neighborhoods just go through this like regeneration process and change, in front of our eyes. And it's cool to watch that. So here's the things that I would look for to identify a neighborhood that is up and coming. First of all, infrastructure. Right now we're experiencing train lines being built in LA. So anything off a train line is pretty much going to be a hot property. When we get back to normal, we all know what the traffic is like here, and people want to be able to use a train, to live near the train, adds a huge amount of convenience. I would also say, like, when you're driving down the major corridors, if you see a lot of construction going on, you see a lot of apartment buildings or new office buildings or buildings being renovated or restaurants popping up in like a certain area, well, that's an up and coming neighborhood. Drive on the little side streets in those neighborhoods. You're going to see that's the next kind of spot. And another thing I would say is to look for neighborhoods that are like even, not neighborhoods that are mixed with a bunch of apartment buildings and single family homes all mixed together, but neighborhoods that are like larger tracts of single family homes. That there's a lot of places like that in LA that have really cute architecture, architecture that hasn't been destroyed. Basically, houses that are intact. They might be older, but they're authentic, and they look like what they originally were built as. Those are the kind of neighborhoods that turn around because people want that architectural authenticity. And so that's how I would identify up and coming neighborhoods. And your realtor should know. Your realtor should be in tune with that, because that's what we love to do. Go and see homes and see what people are doing in different neighborhoods.
Yeah, so transitioning into the topic of fixer properties, Lorin, do you recommend looking at fixers if you're a first-time buyer?
Well, you have to be financially and mentally prepared, okay? So certain fixers, there's a range of fixers and what kind of fixers. a lot of times the best kind of property for a first-time home buyer to buy is a property that maybe needs cosmetic updating. Maybe someone lived there for 50 years, 60 years, and it has carpeting and, you know, old wallpaper, and you can do those cosmetic fixes and it's a really great house. Beyond that, if it needs, you know, if there are serious structural problems or you need to do big construction, you need to be careful because properties like that can't always get financed with conventional loans. And so properties like that do tend to go to developers more because developers will pay all cash. And if you are competing on a property with developers, that's what you're going to be competing against. Now, typically developers are going to pay the least, you know, for a property, but they're not going to, they'll even waive their inspections. Their developers are not going to be concerned with the seller fixing anything. Whereas a home buyer who plans to live in the home might be. So that's, but then the home buyer that's going to live in the home might be willing to pay more. So, you know, you have to see how that plays out. But definitely you have to be prepared. You have to have vendors that you trust, and you have to be prepared maybe to live where you're, you know, to not live in the house right away, but to be able to carry the mortgage and get the work done before you move in.
Okay. So we have one final question for the evening, and then we also have a question in the chat room. Excuse me. And this question is for you, Lorin. You kind of touched bases on this. Is it possible to get fixers, or do developers usually get them?
Yeah, well, it just depends on the, like I said, it just depends on the fixer. I mean, if you know, the ones that are in really super bad condition, I would say pretty much go to developers. You know, and then it will just depend on the situation of the seller and what they feel more comfortable taking. Sometimes a developer can make a seller feel more comfortable by saying, I'm not going to ask you for a thing. I know that this is wrong, this, that, and the other thing is wrong with it. I don't care. And sometimes that'll sell a seller. They don't want the hassle. Sometimes they want to go with someone who is paying more money and they're willing to sort of take that risk and see if they can get through the escrow.
Nice. Thank you, Lorin. So I'll read the questions that we have in the chat room. The first question reads, what are the benefits of multiple units versus a single family home?
The benefits of multiple units?
Yes, a multi-unit property and a single family home.
I mean, I think when you're buying a multifamily, you know, it's an investment property. So you have the ability to buy and hold strategy. You're going to hold on to the property, hopefully, for an extended amount of time. So you have the ability to not only build equity, but also earn income at the same time. Whereas with a single family home, really, you're only just building equity if you're living in the property. So I think with multifamilies, it's the income earning potential that makes it a benefit over like a single family home.
Okay. And
but oftentimes with a multifamily property, you do, the loan terms are different. So you often have to put more money down to buy a multifamily property. So that might, you know, determine whether or not you can.
Okay. And our next question reads, is there a different approach?
Yeah, and also, you know, you can qualify for a little bit more.
Right. You can.
If you do, you know, want to go to a duplex or a triplex, you can qualify just a little bit more because you can use the income from the other properties to help you qualify for more income.
Right.
Thank you, Brandon. So our next question reads, is there a different approach to buying a home that is foreclosed, going through foreclosure, or is a probate property? And I'll read it again because It's a bit of a two-part question. Is there a different approach to buying a home that is foreclosed, going through foreclosure, or is a probate property?
Okay, so I'll start with the foreclosure and then someone else can take the probate. But everybody, you know, it is a fantasy that everyone wants to get a great deal on a foreclosed property. You know, I mean, there's no buyer on earth that doesn't want that. But here's the thing, a true foreclosure sale, once a property is foreclosed, it happens on the courthouse steps, and it has to be a cash offer, and groups of investors buy those properties. You cannot inspect them. you know? So it's definitely not the kind of sale that's tailored towards someone who's going to live in the home. We would never in a million years recommend that you buy a home that you can't even inspect because you have no idea what you're getting into. So people who go to true foreclosure sales, they're looking at the neighborhood, they're investment conglomerates, you know what I mean? And they're looking at their whole portfolio. At the end of the year, if they have a 15% profit on their whole portfolio, then that's good for them. They're not looking at each home, you know, they're looking at the big picture. So if one doesn't make money, the other one makes money, and it all works out in the end. So that's what a foreclosure sale is. So it's very misleading a lot of times for buyers, for regular buyers.
And then regarding there being a different approach to buying a probate property, I wouldn't necessarily say that there's a different approach, but the process is slightly different in terms of a standard traditional sale versus a probate sale. So probate properties are properties that are on the market where the owner has passed away without a trust or a will. And sometimes probate properties are subject to what's called court confirmation, and sometimes there's no court confirmation. So when a property is subject to court confirmation, you can submit the offer, you may have an accepted offer, but ultimately it's the court confirmation that's going to determine whether or not the seller is going to move forward with your offer. And with that court confirmation, so hypothetically speaking, let's say you submit the offer today and the offer is accepted tomorrow. You would then have to wait for the court to set a date. It could be a month from now, it could be 3 months from now. It really just depends on how busy the court is and how many other probate cases they have on their books. And sometimes with a court confirmation, the property is subject to what's called overbid. So you may have the accepted offer and you're really happy thinking you're about to purchase this property, but when a property is subject to court confirmation and overbid, it basically means other buyers can still come in and outbid you. So you may have an offer that's accepted at $500,000, and then the probate judge will then start almost like an auction. So he'll start, increasing the purchase price in certain increments. So it could be $1,000 or it could be $10,000. There's a formula. So you may think, it could be 2 months, 3 months down the road, you're in this process, you arrive in court to only find out that you actually don't have the highest offer because you were outbid in court. For properties that are probate and they're not subject to court confirmation, it's fairly similar to a traditional sale. There's less flexibility in terms of negotiating. So typically probate sales are sold as is. So you're taking the property as is, where is. There's very little room, actually almost no room, to negotiate a price reduction, to negotiate any sort of credit, or to negotiate any sort of repair. So as a buyer, you have to mentally prepare for that, financially too. And then there's just more paperwork. So there's slightly more paperwork with a probate sale than there is a traditional sale.
And then one more thing, the earnest money deposit on a probate is 10%, not 3%.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads us to our final question in the chat room. It was mentioned that the down payment is more for a multifamily property. What is the typical down payment percentage for a multifamily home?
25 to 30% minimum.
Cool. So that concludes our questions in the chat room.
Cool. Anyone else? I hope.
Anyone else have any other questions? So we hope you found this helpful, and we will continue to have our monthly webinars every month. It's the second Thursday of every month from 4 to 5. So you can be on the lookout for emails from us inviting you to our next one. And if there's a topic that you would like us to discuss, feel free to send us an email, let us know. And if there's any additional questions that you think of later today or tomorrow or next week pertaining to what we discussed today, don't hesitate to reach out as well.
And thank you for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it. And have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe.
Thank you.
Take care.